Welcome in to another edition of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. My name is Michael Wein. You can find me at Michael_Wein1 on X. And as always, I am joined by my fantastic co-host, Mr. Emmy Nixon from Austin, Texas, at Emmy_Nixon on X and social media. We are back for another college football and college basketball loaded episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. On the docket today, you'll be listening to this on Friday at some point. We are recording on a Wednesday evening. We've got early post-spring top 25s out by multiple sources in the media, including our guy Joel Klatt for Fox Sports, who released his way too early post-spring top 25, post-spring practices for all the programs across the country. He's got 6 SEC teams inside his top 15, and we are going to be answering one burning question for each of those teams after spring. And then towards the back half of the show, we're going to get into some college basketball transfer portal moves so far this offseason, as we will be going over 3 to 4 of those every week here for about the next 2 months. So with all that being said, we have no time to waste. I will say, and this is totally unrelated, great night if you live in New York City. If you're listening to us and you live in New York City, and you're a New York sports fan, whether that be excluding the football teams, of course, but if you're a New York sports fan this time of year, you got a Mets win, a Yankees walk-off, and a second consecutive 20-point comeback win by the New York Knicks to take a 2-0 lead in that series. Whomst amongst us would have thought, Emmy? What's up, man?
I certainly wouldn't have. I watched that game while at work, and I was just going nuts, just watching the Celtics collapse for the second time in a row. It just felt like the exact same thing over again. We're not here to talk basketball. I'm actually recording this at work. I'm sure y'all noticed that my lighting isn't exactly the greatest, but I haven't been kidnapped. I'm okay. I'm just recording it at work because I thought it'd be a little bit easier for us to get started rather than me going all the way home and starting this at like 10 p.m. So,
Yeah, I can't believe it. It's one of the more stunning starts to a round of the playoffs in my lifetime, where we've
yeah.
had 5 games now through the first, games of the conference semifinals, and not a single home team has won yet. Um,
Six
and that
six
includes
games,
all
I
four,
think, right?
all 4 game ones. The Cavs lost twice, 6 games. Yeah, I mean it's crazy. But we move. I will say I saw this stat and I just have to share it because I dislike Boston so much. Celtics had the best winning percentage in clutch games this season. So far in this series, the last 2 games in the fourth quarter and overtime against the Knicks, they're 11 of 58, shooting 19% in the fourth quarter and overtime so far in this series, and they're 5 of 29 from 3, shooting 17% from the 3-point line in the fourth quarter and overtime of the first 2 games of the series. That's pretty ridiculous. But we'll see where it goes from here. We did, though, record that I'll find a way to tie it all in. We did record a very good bonus NBA pod that will be coming out Thursday or Friday, most likely Friday, along with this episode. So keep an eye out for that and go check out all of our other content. We've got about an hour or so to get through it, so we gotta pick it up. So let's go ahead and get started here. The first team in Joel Klatt's post-spring top 25 in the SEC is our Texas Longhorns at number 2 in his rankings. The question for the Longhorns, as we've already answered tons of questions for Texas, is how many projected first-round picks do you think are on this year's roster, this upcoming year's roster, over the next 2 drafts? So the 2026 draft and the 2027 draft. How many do you think, Jimmy?
Oh, well, I'll just name the ones that come up on the top of my head. Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons, who is eligible for 2027, and then on defensive side of the ball, I think that's it for the next two draft classes. But then you look at the offensive side of the ball. Um, Trevor Gooseby at left tackle is looking like a projected first round pick. Arch Manning, of course. Um, and then you look at the wide receiver position and possibly Ryan Wingo. I feel pretty good about that. I wouldn't say he's done enough at this point to say he's a projected first round pick, but I think he will do enough over the next 2 years. I think that's a fair prediction given what we saw in his freshman season. So that gives us, what was that, 6 names right off the top?
So here's how I have it. I think there are 4 locks to be first round picks, barring some kind of injury that takes him out of that, horrendous injury or something like that we hope doesn't happen. And it's the 4 names you named. I think for 2026, we're likely going to see Anthony Hill go in the top 15. That's what a lot of early mocks have. I think he's a lock as long as he doesn't get hurt this season, and he might even still go in the first round if he gets hurt, depending on the severity of it. And then Trevor Gooseby. I believe, based on everything I've heard about Trevor Gooseby and based on everything we saw at the end of last year when he was able to step in for Kelvin Banks in that A&M game and give up no pressures, no sacks, the way that he looked, if he continues to develop under Kyle Flood, I believe he will likely depart after this season if he gets a first-round grade and he plays that way. But if not, I still think he could be that in 2027. I think either way, he's likely first-round pick. And then, obviously, in 2027, you have Arch Manning. If he doesn't depart this year, which we don't still expect him to, but you never know what can happen, he'll likely be a number 1 overall pick if he lives up to expectations. And Colin Simmons, who I think could be a top 5 pick if he achieves what, if he continues to build off his freshman season, a season where he had 9 sacks. That could be a 15 sack, all SEC, all American, all SEC first team, leading the SEC in sacks kind of guy. That could go in the top 5. So those are the 4 absolute locks. If I'm setting an over under for Texas Longhorn first round picks over the next 2 drafts, I set it at 4.5. Because I think the baseline is 4. But here's where the interesting conversation comes into play. I think you've got 2 guys in particular, one on offense and one on defense, that could elevate themselves with their play either over the next season or 2 seasons into a first-round pick. On offense, that's Ryan Wingo. That's the guy you named. I just think a lot of the time in the NFL, they draft. I heard this from someone the other day. I can't remember who it was. But they draft you. You get into the league based on your physical traits, and then your mental traits keep you there. And Ryan Wingo has all the physical traits in the world. I think the LASIK surgery that he got this offseason to fix his vision will help him, hopefully, you would think. Because he came into the offseason and told the coaches that he had a hard time seeing the ball until it was like right in front of him, and that led to some drop issues here and then and some miscommunications with the quarterback. I think Arch Manning will be a better quarterback than Quinn Ewers. Therefore, I think he will elevate Ryan Wingo's game. Ryan Wingo can run those deep routes. He's got the speed to do that. And Quinn Ewers wasn't well equipped to throw the deep ball throughout his college career. I think Arch Manning can do that. So I think he's the guy on offense. I don't foresee any of the running backs developing into that, but you never know. Maybe if CJ Baxter were to come back and be some all-world level 5-star running back that we thought he could be coming in. Maybe that happens. I don't foresee a Trey Wisener or anybody like that to become a first-round pick. So I think it's Ryan Wingo on offense, and then on defense, I do think Malik Muhammad still has it in him. I still think he has the traits to become a first-round pick. He didn't necessarily play that way last year. Played more like a day two pick. Still really good, but not the shutdown corner that you would hope to draft in round 1 of an NFL draft. But I still think if he comes back and he has an all-SEC caliber season, he could be elevated into that discussion. So I would set the over-under at 4.5, and it all depends on whether that goes over or not. Depends on if a Ryan Wingo or Malik Muhammad, or hell, even a Jalen Gilbo,
Yeah.
who the staff is really high on. If they can do something similar to what they did with Jahdae Barron, that could become a conversation as well. So, but I mean, still, like 4 first-round picks over the next 2 drafts, you'll take that. Let's go ahead and move on. The next question. LSU was up next in the rankings. They're the second highest ranked SEC team in the rankings. They returned Garrett Nussmeier and a bunch of talent all over the place. Can LSU's transfer portal additions elevate them into the college football playoff? It's a big year for Brian Kelly and company coming off an 8-4 season. What do you think?
Well, I think it's all going to depend on the play of Garrett Nussmeier. We saw him play very up and down last year, I would say. I think a lot of the time, I think early on in the year, you saw a possible, first-round pick type of quarterback, and you would just have these moments that are just incredibly head-scratching. It's kind of similar to Cam Ward in a way, except without some of the running ability that Cam Ward has. But I think if he cleans up some of that, I think he'll elevate the team, and they certainly have all the talent to make the leap needed on defense. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the offense that has to put up points in key moments in close fourth quarters inevitably, because you're going to have those close games. You're going to have those must-have-it drives over the course of a season if you're going to contend, and it's going to be on Garrett Nussmeier to deliver. So ultimately, I think the transfer portal additions put them in the conversation, absolutely. But Garrett Nussmeier has to follow suit with the level of quarterback play needed to compete in the SEC.
Yeah, the Tigers didn't live up to the LSU standard in 2023 or 2024. In 2023, with a Heisman-winning quarterback and now one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL going into next year in Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
But they still were good. They ended the season with a 9-4 record. And they didn't really live up to expectations last year. Gave a couple games away due to some mistakes. The defense didn't necessarily live up to standard. The on-field performance wasn't good enough by LSU standards, and Brian Kelly was actually one of the first to admit that. This team needed a talent infusion through the portal, especially on the defensive side of the ball, as they're still trying to get back to playing to the standard of what LSU defenses of past have played like. And so they went out, and give them credit, they added 16 new players, including, I think, multiple projected starters, on the edge on defense. They infused talent there. They got, I think, 2 projected cornerback starters as well. And they managed to, I think, upgrade their weaponry around Garrett Nussmeier to give him the infrastructure he needs in this LSU offense, the infrastructure it needs, the talent that it needs to elevate to another level. Now, they did lose a couple impact players to the draft. You lose Mason Taylor, you lose Braden Swinson on the edge. So they needed, You lose Will Campbell. They lost some key players. They needed a talent infusion. And so I think from top to bottom, if this transfer portal class hits, this could end up being LSU's most talented roster since Brian Kelly took over. But they're going to have to prove it on the field. A couple names to watch before we move on. I think their biggest addition was Patrick Payton, an edge from Florida State. He signs with LSU. They needed juice at that position after losing Braden Swinson, who was a day 3 pick, and I think a underrated sleeper in this year's draft. He was a breakout edge rusher at Florida State. Erupted for 12 sacks over his first 2 seasons there. Won ACC Freshman of the Year honors back in 2022. 4 sacks as a junior, last year, but took a little bit of a step back. But, I think he's a really good player. He's got the size and the physicality to play in the SEC. They needed someone, and they got him. So give him credit. Nick Anderson, a player that Texas fans are all too familiar with, from Oklahoma. Missed all last year due to an injury, but he's a really good player at the wide receiver position. Future NFL player, I think, if he has a good year this year. 6'4", 6'5", just a stud. Again, missed all last year, but set a freshman record at Oklahoma with 10 touchdown catches back in 2023, including the one Texas fans don't want to remember in the corner of the end zone in the Red River rivalry to win that game. Another receiver, Barrion Brown, a guy that Texas has had interested in the past, never entered the portal until this year. Texas didn't end up pursuing because he had a down year last year at Kentucky, but he's got speed galore. He's an elite kick returner. He can help them on special teams. 5 kick returns for touchdowns in 3 seasons at Kentucky. That's insane. But over the 3 years at Kentucky, despite a down year this year, and let's be honest, he was playing with an offense that was very limited at the quarterback position. 122 catches for almost 1,600 yards and 11 touchdowns in 3 seasons. At the very least, I think he can come in and be a productive slot guy, give them speed on offense, and help them on special teams. You got to be good in all 3 phases. It's not just offense and defense. We don't mention that enough on this podcast. And then they added a couple starters in their secondary. Mansour Delaney, a cornerback from Virginia Tech. Really cool name, by the way. Never heard a guy or girl named Mansour, but it's kind of cool. He's a projected starter in their secondary. He's a really good corner, one of the best in the ACC last year. 33 games over 3 years at Virginia Tech. Total 6 interceptions, 16 pass breakups, and 6 forced fumbles. Really good player. They needed that in their secondary. We could go down the list. You can add in Jack Pyburn, another productive edge from Florida, into that discussion, who tore his ACL at the end of 2023 and comes back last year and is really productive for that Florida defense, one of the best players on that defense. They just got not only an injection of talent through the portal, but guys that can start for this team right away, and that's what you want. If you're a high-level program like LSU, you want to build your program through high school recruiting and develop those elite prospects, but you want to fill gaps through the portal. You don't necessarily want as many gaps as LSU has right now. You don't want to have to go get 15, 16, 20 players in the portal every year. I don't know if that's sustainable, but things are looking up at LSU. And if Garrett Nussmeier and some of these transfer portal players hit, they can absolutely find themselves in the college football playoff. Now, we know what happens or what can happen when you don't hit in the portal. Things can go south really fast. I'm not saying if these transfer portal players don't hit, they're going to become last year's Florida State, but that's just an example of like what can happen. You won't be nearly as good as you think you are if these players don't hit, but I'm confident that they will. So let's move on. Next question. The next team in the rankings, the Georgia Bulldogs. The question here is, do you think Georgia has enough talent around their new quarterback, Gunnar Stockton, as Carson Beck is out the door? He's now at Miami. Originally entered the draft, but made the decision shortly thereafter to stay in college. Miami gave him the bag, give him credit. Do you think Georgia has enough talent around Gunnar Stockton to be a national championship caliber offense? If so, or if not, what are your worries about Georgia? Like, do you have any reservations about Gunnar Stockton or this offense moving forward?
Well, I think the main thing is, can the young guys at receiver step up? I think last year the wide receiver position for Georgia was well documented. The catching issues that those wide receivers had. It was pretty bizarre, to be entirely honest. And I'm sure a lot of of their fans. I'm not super in tune with the Georgia program, but I'm sure a lot of their fans were clamoring for some of the younger guys on their bench to play, because they do recruit a wide receiver position extremely well, and there's guys there that could have played and replace guys like Arian Smith in the lineup, but they chose to stick with their veterans. So this time around, those guys are going to get the chance to show what they can do, and I think they have the talent there. I don't have any doubt about that. I think the recruiting machine that is Georgia is going to show itself. I think the question more so for me is, can they get back to kind of the machine like offense that it was under Todd Monken, with like kind of the balance of the offense with the running game getting going and the physical play from the offensive line. Can that all be there as well and kind of get all clicking at the same time? Because I think all of their units on offense had good individual games, but it just didn't really feel like all of the units clicked at once, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that. Here's my thing, and I agree with your sentiment. I do think that Georgia, through the transfer portal and through recruiting this offseason, have added the necessary offensive infrastructure and talent acquisition model to surround Gunnar Stockton to have an offense that is improved in 2024 or 2025, excuse me, from 2024 when they had Carson Beck. I think they upgraded at the wide receiver position significantly. They bring in a guy, Zachariah Branch, who was one of the biggest names that entered the transfer portal in the winter. Star at USC, comes in his freshman season, goes off, was an all-time special teams demon, speed demon, really good in that USC offense with Caleb Williams in his last year there. Of course, USC struggled. The team as a whole struggled, and they've struggled the past couple years. They're trying to get it right there. I don't believe they're even ranked in the preseason top 25 that Joel Klatt put out. I'll have to double check that.
Yeah.
But last year was still very productive in spite of LSU's struggles, right? Catches 47 balls for over 600 yards and some touchdowns. He just provides another element of like dynamism. He'll provide that to this Georgia offense. Last year they struggled with drops. They were historically bad dropping the football. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I don't even need the stats to like tell you if you watch Georgia. And I don't want to bang on anyone in particular, but there was a guy drafted in this past year's draft, the 2025 draft, that dropped a ton of footballs last year. His name started with an A and his last name started with an S. He was ass at catching the football. They need to be better there. Zachariah Branch, I think, will help. He can play in the slot, he can play outside, and he can help them on special teams. They also added Noah Thomas, a guy I thought Texas might go after when he entered the portal. Really tall, jump ball, kind of physical wide receiver. from Texas A&M. I think he'll be operating in a better structure around more talent than he had at Texas A&M, and with quite frankly, I believe a better quarterback than he had at Texas A&M. With Marcel Reed, he's looking for a new infrastructure to play in. I think they upgraded the wide receiver position through the portal. The key for Georgia's offense in 2025 to be championship caliber, because I still think they have the pass catchers needed, right? Oscar Delp comes back at tight end. He could be a first-round pick next year if he has the kind of season that I think he can. Really talented guy. The key for Georgia, there's two keys here. Number one, their running game has to be better. Georgia's run game has to get better in 2025. They were 102nd nationally at 124.4 rushing yards per game last year. That would put them 102nd in the country. They finished 15th in the SEC, only ahead of LSU. And yes, I get it. The Georgia fans and people will point out that they did have games where, they were better in the run game, including that Texas game in Austin where Trevor Etienne scored 3 touchdowns. They were better than that stat suggests. But for the most part, they really struggled to run the football consistently last year. That was more of an admiration than it was kind of the rule for Georgia, that Texas game, or the Texas games, where they were able to run it more effectively. That's not good enough at Georgia. I don't care what anyone says. 15th in the SEC, they got to get back to running the football consistently. And so what's going to have to happen? 4 new starters on the offensive line, but all of them have some kind of experience. So while they're not returning but one starter on the offensive line, they do have experienced players stepping up into roles on the offensive line. Those guys are going to have to gel. And then number 2, the running backs will have to hit. Nate Frazier's a guy that's being elevated into the RB1 role. He actually finished last year with more yards per carry and more touchdowns than Trevor Etienne. Was a really productive back. They add Josh McCray through the portal, a running back from Illinois. And you go look at Illinois, we'll talk about them next week when we talk about the Big Ten. They're lots of people think Illinois can be like last year's Indiana.
Yeah.
They add him. They have depth I think they have solid depth at running back. I think they have the pass catchers. So it's going to come down to the offensive line and then Gunnar Stockton. Like, can you be a top half of the SEC level quarterback with your decision making, your accuracy, just playing within the system and using your athleticism like we saw him do in the Texas game? Sparingly, because you don't want to rely on that in the SEC. You can get banged up really fast.
Oh, yeah.
Doing that in a league as physical as the SEC is. But just not making those key mistakes, having the accuracy to hit these targets, and not having those drops will go a long way towards helping the Georgia offense. And then also, running the football better is necessary. If you don't do that, you're going to be quite one-dimensional. But let's move on. Alabama's next. They're ranked right behind Georgia in this ranking. I believe they're 8-9. I'll double check that. This is a what-if question that Josh Pate actually has answered this offseason in his on his show. And it is, what if Alabama misses the college football playoff again in year 2 under Kalen DaBoer? What happens?
Well, I think it would just depend on the context that goes along with it. If they emphatically miss the playoff, and just for example's sake, let's say they do what LSU did last year. They go 9-4.
Yep.
Again. So let's say they go 9-4. Well, for one, whoever is starting at quarterback for you That's their first year at Alabama. And also, with Saban leaving, you're still building up a lot of young guys within this program. Like, there's not a whole lot of 4-year starters on this roster anymore. So a lot of these guys are, guys that DaBoer recruit. They're starting to be guys that DaBoer recruited. And I think given DaBoer's track record, you got to give him time to at least build this thing up a little bit. I think if year 3 he misses the playoff, then that's a whole other thing. But year 2, unless it goes horribly wrong, I wouldn't hit the panic button just yet.
Yeah, I agree. The context matters. Here's what I'll say about Alabama, because the second part of my question was going to be, what are the X factors? What are the swing factors for success this year at Alabama? But I think they're fairly obvious.
Yeah.
Number one, big hire in the offseason. They made a change at offensive coordinator. They bring in Ryan Grubbs, who, if you remember, if you're a college football fan, where was Ryan Grubbs 2 years ago?
UW
with
national championship level team, the Michael Penix Jr. and Kalen
DaBoer. Exactly. So there is some familiarity there. I think he's the X factor here, along with whoever wins the quarterback job, which I believe is going to be Ty Simpson, a former 5-star who's been in the Alabama program a couple years, sitting behind Jalen Milroe the last couple years. But he is a 5-star. He's pretty big. He's athletic. Haven't seen him a ton in games, but we have seen him occasionally. He's looked pretty good. They need the quarterback position to hit, obviously. They need him to be a guy who maybe isn't up to the Michael Penix level. We would never expect that. Become a top 10 pick in the draft, have that kind of season that Michael Penix had at Washington. Probably not that. But if he can be a top half of the league quarterback in the SEC this year, they have the offensive infrastructure, I believe, to be really good. You probably have the best offensive player in the SEC in Ryan Williams. I mean, is that outrageous to say? I don't think it is.
No.
You bring back Jeremy Bernard, who is one of the few 3-4 year starters at different programs who has familiarity in this system. He transferred from Washington to Alabama. He came with Kalen DaBoer. He knows the Ryan Grubb system. He's your wide receiver too. You have Jam Miller, really productive back as one of the lead backs for Alabama last year. Solid offensive line. You return Caden Proctor at left tackle, who I think is going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, whether it's next year or the year after. You have the talent. The quarterback position has to hit, and Ryan Grubbs is going to play a big part in that. He's done it before at different schools. Last year with the Seahawks in the NFL, didn't necessarily go quite as planned with Mike McDonald, but at the college level, all we've seen this guy do is produce. I think he's going to bring some different looks to Alabama. I think his style will fit the kind of quarterback that Ty Simpson is. We know his system, like a lot of offenses, is predicated on a quarterback that can throw with accuracy and with timing, like Michael Penix was able to do. I think hopefully they'll have that with either Ty Simpson or Austin Mack, who's a transfer from Washington, another talented kid, or even if the freshman starts, who I think is probably the most talented quarterback in their room, and the kid from Duncanville, blanking on his name right now, it'll come to me.
Keelan Russell.
Keelan Russell, exactly. Thank you. But Ryan Grubbs. If he can get this offense going, there's plenty of talent here. If he can mesh with Ty Simpson, Alabama is definitely, I think, a team that can make the college football playoff. The context of their season matters, though. If they go 9-3, say, and they're one of the last teams, on the bubble trying to get into the college football playoff, but those losses are to Georgia by 3, and a couple other close losses. Non-consequential losses like they had last year. Like, not the kind of losses where you get blown out by Oklahoma or blown out by Vanderbilt. If they lose to some high-level teams in competitive games, I think they could still make the playoff at 9-3. But if they go 8-4 and there's 3 blowout ugly losses in there, Alabama fans either way, if they miss the playoff, aren't going to be happy because they still live in a world where they think Alabama needs to be in the college football playoff every year because of what they lived through with Nick Saban. But it all depends on the context there. That's pretty much it there. Let's move on. South Carolina under Shane Beamer is the next team that we got to talk about here. How viable do you think the Gamecocks are as a college football playoff contender this upcoming year? And if you're unsure about South Carolina potentially contending for the college football playoff coming off a 9-3 season, what do you think could be their Achilles heel? Or are you confident that they're going to be a playoff team?
Well, I think the main thing is for South Carolina, they don't have the, level of recruiting, consistency as some of these other programs they're competing with to get into the playoff. So I think to me it'd be a question of depth. Like if they go through some attrition in terms of injuries at key positions, are some of the guys, second string, third string at key spots going to be able to step up to the challenge and give them, good play. I think Lenore Sellers can cover a lot of gaps, but in the SEC, quarterback play isn't really everything. It's really, like, we've said this a million times, but the game is won at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. So the offensive line and defensive lines. Last year, the defensive line was fantastic for South Carolina, and they have a lot of those guys returning. So I feel very good about that. The offensive line, though, I think Lenore Sellers, and I think he'll continue to do so. He covers a lot of shortcomings that have happened within that offensive line, but eventually that'll come to bite you on the ass. So I do have that concern for South Carolina. I do think they have a shot, but I wouldn't really say I wouldn't call them a favorite to make the playoff, but I do think they're contenders.
I agree. And I think the most important point is offensive line. That was the most glaring area for improvement coming into this offseason. Now, Sellers, I think he's one of the most dynamic, if not the most dynamic. He could end up being the most dynamic quarterback in America this upcoming season.
Yeah.
I think he's got Heisman level performance in him. And if he's a finalist in New York for the Heisman, I do think South Carolina has the necessary talent. And that means the season went well enough to where they're probably in the playoff. They probably go 10-2 and make the playoff. So they have that going for them. They have the dynamite player that can elevate you at the quarterback position. But their offensive line was, once Sellers got hurt last year and Robbie Ashford came in, things went to kind of crap on offense because of their offensive line. They were top 10 in the country in sacks allowed. Most sacks allowed, I should say. Not good. This team goes as Lenora Sellers goes, but if the offensive line is allowing tackles for loss, setting them up behind the chains, they were also top 10 in tackles for loss allowed. And Lenora Sellers is constantly getting hit. Number one, the more times he gets hit, the more likely he is to potentially get hurt, which you don't want, because their backup quarterback situation last year was pretty bleak with Robbie Ashford. And number two, like they just got to be better, both in the run game and the pass game, because you can't be behind the chains against all the talented defenses you're going to face in the SEC. As talented as Lenore Sellers is, he can't all the way overcome a really bad offensive line. They got to get better there. I think they will, though. I do think that they will. And then just being a more, how do I want to say this? A more disciplined offense. Last year, turnovers and penalties, turnovers and penalties, turnovers and penalties. It felt like in some of these big games, the LSU game comes to mind, a couple other games come to mind. Turnovers and penalties really hurt them. Offensive blunders that could be prevented, easily prevented. Feels like several of their kind of momentum surges in big games were ruined by either a botch handoff in the fourth quarter against Alabama that led to Alabama leading or scoring the go-ahead touchdown on the ensuing drive, right? A game that South Carolina, I thought, should have had, but botched handoff, sloppy play, leads to Alabama winning that game. A +3 turnover margin, but that leaves a lot to be desired. They turned the ball over 4 times against LSU. Like, it just felt like there were games to be had for South Carolina, and that they gave them away at times. And then penalties were also a big issue. 13 penalties against LSU, a game which they lost 36-33 at home. That can't happen. They just let themselves no margin for error with the turnovers and the penalties last year. They got to eliminate some of that. But I do think one of the best players in college football is coming back for them next year on defense. Dylan Stort, one of the best pass rushers in college football. I think they brought in some talent through the transfer portal. They've got a bunch of young talent at the wide receiver position. Those guys have to step up, but I think they're well set there. They're going to have a good run game. I believe in Shane Beamer's squad to make a run at the college football playoff. We'll just have to see what they can do. Our final question for tonight, and our final team for tonight, team in the top 15, I believe they're ranked 15, the Florida Gators. What do you think should be the minimum bar expectation for Florida in year 4 under Billy Napier? Year 4 under head coach Billy Napier. After finishing strong last year, 8-4 for the Gators. What do you think?
Minimum bar expectation. I think they, at the very least, need to get at least one more win than last year. So I think they finished last year with 7 wins?
Yeah, 7 wins.
I think 8 or more. I think that's their minimum bar expectation. I think that's fair, given the fact that they got a full year with DJ Lagway this time around, and you expect that defense to at least be able to hold their own a little bit. They had some really rough games early on in the season, but it kind of seemed like it stabilized to close the year. So if that continues, or if that even gets better, then I think you're in business and you can really start competing with just about anybody.
Yeah, I agree. Finished the season 7-5 last year on a strong note at the end of the season. They need DJ Lagway to hopefully stay healthy. If he does, he's the kind of quarterback like Lenore Sellers who can elevate the pieces around him. They have probably the most talented roster they're going to have so far under Billy Napier this upcoming season. Hopefully the defense under new leadership can be better. I think it will be. Some of the talent they added on defense through the portal. They just added a really talented receiver from Miami, I believe, yesterday. I think they're going to be better on both sides of the ball. The keys for them, number one, they got to get off to a quicker start. You can't get off to the slow starts that you've gotten off to the last couple of years, where you set yourself behind the chains with 1-2, 1-3 starts. That just can't happen. 2 losses at home, both in the beginning of the season last year. Ugly losses to A&M and Miami early on in the season last year. Had people talking about getting rid of Billy Napier after like 4 games. Fortunately enough for them, they were able to turn around. They were able to beat Ole Miss. They were able to beat a couple teams down the stretch. And that saved Billy Napier's job for at least this season. If Billy Napier wants to get an extension, though, I think the minimum expectation should be 8 or more wins. And try to have, like, if I'm a Florida fan, I want to try to have a winning year in the SEC. Can you have a winning record in SEC play? 5-3 or better. Not going to be easy, but a lot of those tough road games that you had to play last year, at Georgia, at Texas, at whoever, right? You get those games at home this year in the Swamp. And so try to have a winning year in the SEC. Try to put yourself at least in the conversation to maybe sneak into the playoff. If you can get to 9-3 against this schedule, you might have a chance, depending on what else goes on in college football this year. But 8-4 or better in a winning year in the SEC, I think would get Florida fans really excited about what they could do in 2026, because the schedule supposedly will flip, and so it might lighten up a little bit. And you'll get another year of DJ Lagway. He can't go to the draft after this year. You'll get him to return next year, and it'll probably be even better. So set the foundation for what will likely be one of the best teams in the country, or hopefully might be one of the best teams in the country in 2026. Anything else on Joel Klatt's post-spring top 25 and the SEC teams in the top 15? Anything else you want to mention?
No, I think that's it, man. I think there's a argument to be had about the viability of Ole Miss heading into next year, and also Auburn. I think both of those teams are interesting, but I think those conversations can be had on another episode.
Yeah, so that's actually what I wanted to mention before we get to our last segment of tonight. So tonight we talked about the 6 SEC teams, one question for each of them, in Joel Klatt's post-spring top 25 that he came out with on Monday. Those were Texas at number 2, LSU at number 7, Georgia at number 8, Alabama at number 9, South Carolina at number 11, and Florida at number 13. Next week, we're going to get into 6 more teams, most of which are in the Big Ten. The teams that we're going to talk about next week are as follows. We're going to talk about Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Illinois, Michigan, and we'll add in Notre Dame or Clemson. It'll be something along those lines. And then the next episode, we might not get to 6 teams necessarily, but this will be a 3-part series where we can address those interesting teams that you talked about. Auburn, Ole Miss, A&M, Miami, Clemson, or Notre Dame. I think Arizona State is going to be an interesting team this year after making the playoff last year. But we'll do mostly Big Ten along with Notre Dame and or Clemson next week. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, sounds good.
This will kind of be our post-spring college football series. We're not going to get to all 4 transfer portal additions in college basketball tonight because I do want to honor people's time and wrap this up in about an hour or so. Right now we're at 49 minutes, but we are going to talk about at least 2 of these. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start with the Texas Longhorns and Sean Miller, who have 5 transfer portal signees now in this class as they try to build out the roster in the first year under Sean Miller. April 24th comes around. They have Matas Voikatitis, the transfer from Florida Atlantic, the big man that we've already talked about. They have Dalen Swain sign, the wing from Xavier that he brings over from his Xavier team last year. They have Cam Heide, a stretch 4, kind of stretch 3-4 forward who can shoot the 3. They have 4 guys signed, right? They bring in Lassina Traore, another big man from Xavier who was hurt all last year, but he's a big guy, front court depth. This one's big though. They go out and they get Simeon Wilcher, a guard from St. John's who just finished his sophomore year. Emmy, what do you know about Simeon Wilcher, if anything? What do you think about this ad for the Horns? Their 5th transfer portal ad of the cycle.
Well, he's an athletic combo guard that can score the ball. I think he's a better shooter than what he showed last year as well. I think he shot 33%, I want to say, from 3 last year. I don't have it right in front of me, but that sounds right. It was somewhere in that range. But shot 38% as a freshman. So I think for him, if Sean Miller can get him back to, shooting the way he did his freshman season, I think you're looking at a guy who's athletic, can run the floor in transition, can, run pick and roll as a ball handler. I think, as a, off the dribble scorer, I think he could improve in that sense in terms of efficiency, but he's a guy who's confident enough to take a shot and create a shot late in a shot clock, and that provides value whether it's a super efficient or not. I think just having a guy with the confidence to go out and create space on his own is very valuable.
I think you hit it on the head, man. He's going to be a junior this year, so he's got multiple years left of eligibility. Love that. He was a top 50 recruit coming out a couple years ago from the New York area. Commits to St. John's, was a building block for that program over the last couple years. We know what St. John's was this year. Very, very best season in 30 years for that program. Probably are going to be a preseason top 10 team at the very least going into 2025 with some of the talent they've added, one of which we'll get to maybe wrap up the episode. But Wilcher, I really like this addition because I kind of view him right now with the talent that they have at the guard position as maybe a 7th or 8th man off the bench who has a skill set that I think can help this Texas team. He's a combo guard, as you mentioned. He's a really solid athlete. Love that Texas has all these like combo guard athletes on the wing now. Kendall Weaver will be healthy. Dalen Swain's like the guy, like he's that in a nutshell. I think Tremont Mark has some of those qualities as well. He's really efficient at slashing, playing in the pick and roll, getting to the rim and scoring. He shot 60% at the rim last year. So really efficient inside the paint. Didn't have the greatest year shooting, as you mentioned. And that's the X factor. Can he become more of a knockdown shooting threat for this Texas team? They are going to need some shooters to emerge for this team. So can he be a guy that plays more like he did his freshman season than he did last year? He did shoot 29% from 3 last year. Can he become a plus 3-point shooter for this Texas team? But I think he'll start in a role off the bench as a really solid athlete. He'll bring good defense. That's something I really like. He's got the size at 6'4-ish, 6'5-ish. Average 8 points per game. 48% true shooting percentage in 36 games last year. Played in a big-time league in the Big East. Top 50 level like recruiting talent coming out of high school. I think there's a lot to tap into here with Simeon Wilcher. I think he'll start out in a role off the bench, but he could emerge as a guy that comes a starter down the road if he can inject some of that shooting that Texas needs on this roster. Because Dalen Swain, as good as he is, isn't really known to be a shooter. Kendall Weaver, as good as he is, hasn't really been known to be a shooter. They have Jordan Pope, they have Tremont Mark. Those guys can knock them down, but they're going to need some shooters along with Cam Heide to emerge. Let's wrap things up with St. John's and the player that they got in the portal. We just talked about one that left. Let's talk about a player they got in the portal, and that's Former 5-star recruit, freshman for North Carolina, Ian Jackson. Any thoughts on Ian Jackson committing to St. John's and Rick Pitino?
Well, I think Ian Jackson. I'll start off with this. He's supremely athletic.
Yep.
The fact that he, you know, enters the transfer portal as a guy who I think has the ability to, if he comes out next year and scores 20 points per game, I wouldn't even blink an eye. I wouldn't even bat an eye at that. He has the, microwave scoring ability, can create his own shot, has, supreme confidence as a scorer. I mean, for a St. John's team that prides itself on the defensive end of the floor, as you know, all Pitino teams do, adding a guy like this to kind of, add some scoring punch, I think it's huge. I mean, it's a big deal, and I think it's good that we got to this one tonight because I just feel like this is one of the biggest moves in all of college basketball in the transfer portal.
Yeah, you hit it. We wanted to start things off with a bang in this series of college basketball transfer portal analysis and NBA draft analysis, which should start either next week or the week after. And Ian Jackson is just that. And everything you said there is spot on. I can tell you did your homework. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you just know who Ian Jackson is. But I can tell you did your homework because, last year at North Carolina and what was another down year for the Tar Heels. Probably not going to get to their big transfer portal ad tonight. We'll get to it next week, though. Exactly what this St. John's program needs to continue their success, to continue to build off of this past year. You lose Kadari Richmond. You lose R.J. Lewis, who's into the NBA draft. Might withdraw his name from the draft, depending on what kind of evaluation he gets. If he were to return to St. John's, that would be even bigger. I don't expect it, though. They needed an injection of talent through the portal, guys that can come in and contribute right away. And I think Ian Jackson has the talent to become, if he builds off last year, a year where he shot 39.5% from three on 12 points per game and 2.5 rebounds per game. If he can do that or something even better than that for this St. John's team, that's going to be huge because they're trying to replace a lot there in that backcourt. But what was St. John's biggest flaw last year? They couldn't shoot. They couldn't shoot consistently. They weren't a good 3-point shooting team. And so you inject this guy into that backcourt. Hopefully he can help you there. You can't be 340th in 3-point field goal percentage and win a national championship. As good as St. John's was last year because of their defense, their physicality, and Zuby Ejiofor on the interior and things of that nature, you just can't do that. So they're going to need to get much better in that area, and Ian Jackson can help them there. He's an explosive NBA-level athlete. He could go to the NBA if he has a really good season after this year because he's that kind of guy. I don't know that he's a lockdown perimeter defender, but he's definitely a plus defender on the perimeter, which you have to be to play in Rick Pitino's system. I think he's got all the talent in the world. He'll just need to adapt to the team structure of St. John's. They're bringing in a lot of transfers, including a guy that we're familiar with. We might talk about him in the future. Used to play at Texas. Name starts with a D. Dylan is a hint. Do you know Dylan Mitchell? Dylan Mitchell. You remember Dylan Mitchell?
Yeah.
He's now at St. John's. After a year at Cincinnati, he's at St. John's. He'll be there. They bring in a couple other guards, including Bryce Hopkins from Providence. They have one of the best portal classes in America. So we'll see what happens with St. John's. But Ian Jackson, I think you definitely hit on it, is one of the biggest moves so far in the portal. We'll get to the North Carolina move next week. We'll get to some moves by Michigan. We'll get to some other moves as well. We might start NBA draft coverage as, guess what? The NBA lottery is on Monday. So we're in the middle of a crazy wild NBA playoffs. This is one of the most wild things I've ever seen in
Yeah.
the NBA playoffs, the start to this conference semifinal round. Um, Real quick before we sign off, let's go ahead and check. Let's get an update on this Nuggets.
Yeah, the Thunder put up 78 in the first half.
Oh, God. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the Nuggets won't be coming back from that. They came back from a
No.
deficit. They came back from a deficit in game one. The Knicks just came back from another deficit in game two and went up 2-0. This deficit, they ain't coming back from that. But
Uh-uh.
they did the job. They did what they needed to do. They got a game in Oklahoma City. So they go back
Yep.
home kind of limping, but you feel pretty good if you're a Nuggets fan.
Yeah, we've got ourselves a series.
So, Emmy, before we get out of here, as we're now at the hour mark, we perfectly timed this. In terms of what we're doing here at Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports with this post-spring college football top 25, where we're really diving into all the different programs, kind of getting ourselves back in the swing of things, talking college football, talking about the actual football on the field. I know it's easy nowadays in college football, the world that we live in, to talk about college football, but not about the football on the field, about so many
Yeah.
other things, right?
The politics, the
We're getting
drama, all of it.
into the teams. What do you think about the structure that we have set up and kind of the series that we're doing with the portal, the NBA draft, and this college football stuff? Where do you stand? Like, what do you think we're in a good place with Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports?
Yeah, dude. I think the show Deep in Heart Long Sports, I think I would argue that it possibly has a higher ceiling in terms of building a following than uh, our other podcasts. Like I honestly do believe that, and we'll have this conversation off the record as well. But um, it might be time to give this thing its own channel because I really do think the content we do for Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, I think uh, it's got real potential to go somewhere. I really do think that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Um, Again, we're also going to have much more recruiting content coming up throughout the summer because we're almost to official visit season. And so for the month, we'll get through this post spring top 25 series for college football. We'll be done with it, in the next couple weeks. And then right after that, we're going to start a recruiting series going into official visits. It'll be perfect timing. And then on the back half of that, in each episode, we'll have lots of basketball discussion. So I'm in love with where we are. Um, and hopefully you guys are too. If you like what we do here, make sure you guys like and subscribe. We just released an episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports on Monday morning. That's up on our channel. We talked about the reports of Texas football NIL. We talked about a new quarterback addition to their room. We got into a bunch of good stuff. The baseball team on that episode. So go check that out. This episode will be out on Friday sometime, along with our bonus NBA pod, which you'll want to see as well. Thank you guys for being here. We greatly appreciate it. Tell your friends about us if they love college sports or the Longhorns, or even if they hate the Longhorns. Tell them to tune in and see if they like us. We try to be as objective as we can on this channel, and go check out our other football content, draft winners and losers for each division. Emmy and I have recorded those episodes. They'll be coming out sometime in the next week or two. So check those out as well. But for Michael Wein, for Emmy Nixon, from Houston, Texas, and Austin, Texas, respectively, this has been Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Hook 'em. Have a good night. Peace out. Absolutely. You must.